Let's turn our attention to the person who's the major contender for the position of Prime Minister at the moment, and that would be Poilievre. Now, you already said, and the Conservatives, you already said that you're stringently and consciously nonpartisan, not only in your attitudes, but also in your financing. And so we're presuming that you're attempting to evaluate both of these men and their ideas at the realm of competence and idea. So tell me about Poilievre. You've had some interaction with him. You've talked to some of his advisors about the issues that we've been describing. Tell me what you're concluding, what you're seeing.
Well, when I wrote that piece about we're all economic nationalists now, that was really a word to the neocons, that if you're a Friedmanite, then be a Friedmanite. Adjust to the facts on the ground. And I've recently heard some things that are encouraging that seem like the emergence of, and Mr. Poilievre does not owe us a full campaign yet because the campaign has not started. So my fulsome evaluation is to be done. But I think Carney's played his cards because he's in a campaign, right?
Well, he's written this book.
He's written a book and he's done a campaign. So I assume that's his playbook. And Mr. Poilievre is imminent, if there's an election imminent, which I think there is. But he's done some green shoots, which intrigued me. He recently said, we need to take back control of our economy. We need to be sovereign, secure, and prosperous, or something like that. But the fact that the government has a role of taking back control of our destiny and our security and our sovereignty and our prosperity and our economic entity, not as protectionism, but to make us strong for a dangerous world and to make our companies strong going out to the world. Well, that's interesting. And then he has...
Well, and you see this as somewhat of a radical departure from Canadian political maneuvering on both sides of the aisle over the last 30 years.
He's introducing the second leg. And then what I've heard, for the first time in 30 years, he has an industry critic named Rick Perkins who has said, we need to own our ideas, we need to control our data to build our companies. And nobody has said that. It was an interview about a month ago, and I'm like, well, where'd that come from? And then he's had...
So where did it come from?
I think they're thinking. I think they're trying to think. They're trying to realize that there's two legs here. His trade critic, Ryan Williams, has been calling for updated trade strategies where we actually figure out how to project Canadian interests in these games where there's strategic behavior by nation states, which is encouraging because we should have had it 30 years ago. Nice to start now. Michelle Rempel's been talking about updated competition strategies where you don't just throw it as one bucket. You need to compete in domestic services more, but you need to support our global traders more. So one is a supporting them into the world. One is to compete away monopoly rents that hurt consumers. Again, that distinction has not been done for 30 years. And I've heard Michelle Rempel and Adam Chambers talk about helping Canadian companies grow for the benefit and building more capacity in the civil service to deal with this change. So I see these as green shoots in what seems to be a loosely emerging Poilievre doctrine. We see the Carney doctrine. The green shoots seem in the right...
We know the Carney doctrine.
Yeah, we do, yeah.
Like Values is a rather thorough book for all its failings. And people tend to do what they say they're going to do. So that's laid out. You see the emergence of something approximating a Poilievre doctrine.
A two-legged race. And if we don't have a two-legged strategy, we will be subordinated, Puerto Rico without a passport. If we do have it, then the question is, are we effective in the capacity building of the political class and the civil service to actually perform while we've been atrophied in this realm for the better part of 30 years.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit, because I'd like to get a bit more concrete about that. So what you've said was, I'll paraphrase, and you tell me if I've got this right, that independent of Carney's diagnosis of the need for transformation in our economy, your assessment of the strategies that he's put forth so far are first, let's say, that he hasn't fleshed out anything indicating any understanding whatsoever of the problems that you've described in the second leg of this race.
He's rooted. He's got bad economics. It's rooted in the 1970s economics. It's poor economics.
Okay,
it's poor. It's for a doctor. It's poor surgery.
Right. And the second problem is that the plan that he is going to implement is going to make what we do well more expensive and less productive, and exacerbate our problems on the side of the things that we don't do well.
With no strategies to resolve that dichotomy.
Okay, so that's Mr. Carney. Now,
and then moralizes that says we got to spend more money longer doing the things we did before, because that's the key, because people don't see the pot of gold of just opening up your wallets more, despite the fact we've been opening up our wallets for decades at enormous amounts. It's just about more and longer.
Okay. Now, on the Poilievre front, well, we've talked a little bit about the shortcomings of a strictly libertarian free market view in light of the realities of the new economy. But you're saying that, and you've discussed a number of the people that's working with him, and these are people that you've had some contact with. You're following them as in discussions?
Following them. I've testified at committees. Yeah.
Okay, and you're seeing the emergence of something that you think has some promise. Okay, so let's delve into that a little bit more. At the beginning of our conversation, you pointed out, for example, that the Americans have developed these councils that Canada scrapped 30 years ago that enabled
33 years ago. But who's counting?
Right. That enabled them. Well, those were pretty remarkable 3 decades, right? It's definitely not 1970 anymore, right? It's probably not even 2010 anymore.
Oh dear.
Right. Okay, and so what do you think needs to be done by either of these leaders, for that matter, to provide Canadian politicians, the political system, the civil service, with the expertise necessary to develop the policies that would make us competitive with the cutthroat Americans, for example, who are definitely rampaging down this road at a rate that's really quite miraculous. So what else would you like to see emerging on the political front that's going to help us deal with our inadequacies in the second leg of this?
Well, the dilemmas of the muddling is going to be is we need a neurosurgeon, not a dermatologist.
Yep.
And say, well, get me a neurosurgeon tomorrow, and it's going to take time to train people to be a neurosurgeon.
Yeah.
You can't just, you've got to find the expertise where it is, and you've got to build the capacity. And that's not going to happen overnight. And we have to have democratic discourse, not bullying. That's why I said we're all economic nationalists now. That's a calling out of the bullies because we don't do discourse.
Well, what changes?
We do bullying in Canada. We don't do discourse.
What do you mean by that?
You just ad hominem shut people down and state your dogma, right? You're either, free markets or you're North Korea. Mm-hmm. And somebody says, well, you're just a mean, whatever phobe, and who just wants to be like MAGA. And in fact, these are very complex, very technical, very nuanced realms in a geostrategic era of strategic behavior. And the stakes are enormous. And what Trump has done is just laid it all bare. It's been going on for decades. He just turned the heat up really fast, I would say irresponsibly fast. And I think he's miscalculated, because if the world responds strategically to that threat.
Okay, so now we have an opportunity.
We have that
side.
opportunity. So will we build the capacity in our civil service? Will the Conservatives go through a process of actually debating ideas and figuring out this?
Who should they be discussing this with? Like, where is the expertise that's available?
There's lots of it in the country, but they have to be open to ideas. And I think
who would they invite to speak? Who would they talk with?
There's lots of practitioners, and there's no business councils like in the U.S. Our domestic business councils, except for the Council of Canadian Innovators, are very dominated by foreign interests who are considered Canadian firms, but they represent the foreign
So we
firm.
need to find people, for example, who have been successful in the new digital
think
realms,
of Canada
let's say.
first. And they're in there in certain think tanks, certain universities. There are experts out there, but it has to begin with leadership that says,
we're open to this.
And because to have the right answer but not have everybody with you is not going to work.
Yeah.
So but I don't think we can do a 5-year Royal Commission. That's because it needs to be something quicker and iterative. And so that's the journey, but that's the leadership opportunity. Whichever one of the two articulates that says, this is a two-legged race, I need to have updated approaches here.
And you think we have the expertise in Canada that's
100%.
Why 100%?
Because I deal with them with regularity. But they've been pushed to the fringe by the people who cooked this strategy 35 years ago, and they're fighting on all they can to protect their legacy of getting it right in spite of this Canadian resource curse. And I'm saying we are where we are because of this flaw, and you need to bring in new voices. And I've funded a new initiative called Public Policy Shield Initiative, much more for young scholars and young thinkers to come in and architect the future that they want, that they're going to inherit and they're going to live in. And I think if Pierre Poilievre or Carney chooses to embrace these true experts to design a proper two-legged race, then I think we're going to be okay.
Maybe better than okay even.
Much better than okay. But I get very nervous about a more efficient Trudeau.
Yeah.
And the hubristic representation of knowing things that you don't.
Yeah.
And a little humility with openness to ideas and a communication structure with Canadians that says, I'm involving new smart voices. I've got good leaders who are buying into this. I'm open to this stuff. We're going to be on this journey together. I think our future can be the best yet to come. But if we fail in that, I think the failure will be
marked.
Yeah, really bad.